Hey, it's Ryan with this week's Mille Lacs Fishing Report. It's after New Year's and the walleye bite is heating up. We'll get started with the ice conditions. Ice conditions in the bays, the resorts are plowing out. They're getting vehicle traffic out there. They're getting a lot of fish houses out there. You're going to have to contact the resort and kind of see where they're at as far as whether they're letting 1 tons out and stuff of that sort. But there's definitely a lot of traffic in the bays, and overall I've heard some pretty decent reports on fishing too. Moving on to the main lake. Main Lake's a bit of a different story. A lot of resorts are plowing roads out there, but they're not necessarily letting vehicle traffic out yet. I'm seeing pretty much everybody letting out four-wheelers, side-by-sides, snowmobiles, that sort of thing. But I'm not seeing a lot of trucks and cars driving out of the main lake accesses yet. I would contact your local resort. They'll give you a better idea of what's going on at their particular access. But what I'm noticing in the main lake as far as ice conditions is a lot of ice in that 13 to 17 inch range. There may be a little bit less in some areas, there may be a little bit more in areas. What I'm finding on the upper end of the range is the thicker ice that I'm finding had a little bit of a layer of slush on top of it that froze. So it may not be like a true 17, 18, 19 inches of ice. The stuff that I'm finding on the lower end, stuff in that 11 to 13 inch range, that's good solid ice, but it's typically packed under, a foot to 2 feet of snow. Overall, I would say the average is anywhere from 13 to 15 inches. Now, as far as mobility and getting around on the lake, a couple weeks ago we had some serious issues. There was a lot of slush on the lake. It would have made wheel traffic kind of difficult if you had a four-wheeler or a side-by-side with wheels. With tracks, it was no problem, but some of the pockets were pretty sticky. What we had right after that snowstorm and the slush that followed it was some record cold temperatures that really hardened things up. Not only did the cold temperatures harden up a lot of the slush that was underneath the ice, but the heavy winds that we got took the snow and packed it down real tight and made travel out on the lake pretty easy right now for anything with wheels or tracks. If you're driving a four-wheeler or a side-by-side with wheels, you shouldn't have much of an issue out there. If you have a snowmobile or something with tracks, it's easy going. Now, I've been hearing some people talk about slush on the lake, and what I'm finding for the most part when it comes to slush out there is maybe if there's like an actively moving crack, you might have some water seepage coming up from it, which I haven't encountered much of out there. The big thing that I'm noticing is when you drill holes. So if you go out and you plop your fish house down, or if you're just out hole hopping, you'll notice that after you drill a hole, within a few minutes you have some water and slush coming up around it. That's typical when you have this amount of snow on not quite enough ice like we have right now. If you're bringing a fish house up and you're going up out of the bays or you're pulling it out more to the main lake with your wheeler, I would definitely bring some blocks with you. Bring some 4x4 blocks, be prepared to block it up, 4 to 8 inches, just to be on the safe side. Moving on to the main lake walleye bite, I think the best way to go about it this week is to break it down into pretty much the 3 main sections: the rock piles, the gravel bars, and the mud flats. The rock piles are what's going to get the most attention right now, simply because they're closer to shore and they're much more easily accessible. And what I've noticed on the rock pile bite is it's not as good as it was a couple weeks ago during the day. I think a guy can go there in the morning, evening, or throughout the late night hours and catch some fish. But the daytime bite, I just haven't been doing as well on them as I was earlier. Earlier, I was doing pretty well in that 10 to 20 foot zone. I was targeting stuff that were rock to gravel transitions, and we were catching fish throughout the day. What I've noticed now is the bites that I'm getting tend to be right at sunrise, sunset. I think if a guy were to stick there throughout the night, put up a permanent house, and put some rattle reels down, you could probably get some action through the wee hours of the morning. But that's pretty typical for this time of year. What we're going to see is a lot more fish house traffic starting to get to these rock piles, especially the shallow ones. And you're going to see that morning, evening, night bite. But what I would recommend doing is, if you're going to put your fish house on those areas, is to try to avoid the commotion, try to get away from the main roads, try to get away from other fish houses, and try to keep quiet at night. That seems to be the best way to get fish on the shallower rocks, and that bite should continue for a couple weeks here until we get just a lot of traffic on the lake. Moving on to the gravel bars, I'm hearing some mixed reports on the gravel bars. We've been going out there a little bit, touching on them. We were catching a couple fish, but we weren't really crushing them. I've talked to some other guys, some friends of mine who have been doing really well out there, but it seems to be a little more spotty when you go to the gravel bars. What I would recommend doing is if you are going to the gravel bars, I'd go right up on top, and if you do know of some areas that have some mixed rock in with the gravel, those are going to be best. As always, the morning-evening bite is going to be best on the gravel bars, but there are definitely some fish biting throughout the day out there too. As far as depths, I would say 24 to 28 is a pretty good starting point when you're fishing the tops. Now to talk about the mud. The mud flats have been really good for me lately. There's hardly any traffic out there. I mean, you can look around the lake when you get out to the mud and you can count on one hand how many other people are fishing out there. It's bare, but the fishing has been very good. And I'm a little pleasantly surprised by that. I expected some good fishing out on the mud, but it's been better than expected. We're getting a range of sizes of fish, anywhere from little 6-inch fish all the way up to 26-inch fish. And we're getting everything in between. So there's definitely a lot of activity out there. I've noticed some of the flats tend to have a few more perch on them, and other ones seem to be mostly walleyes. I'm not catching any tulipy out there, but what I have been noticing is that the fish are typically biting deeper than I normally fish the flats. I've been drilling holes and fishing up on top. I've been fishing the edges, and I've been fishing out and away from the flats, out in the basin. And we've been doing pretty decent out in the basin. We've been doing all right on the edges, and we're only picking up a couple on top. It seems like the deeper fish is kind of the way to go out there right now. When you're going to the flats, you know, you're always looking for certain pieces of structure. Even if the fish aren't necessarily on the structure, such as a point or an inside turn or a cup or something along those lines, a lot of times they'll still be relating to it. So find those pieces of structure on the flat, drill holes, don't be afraid to get away and out and a ways from the flat. We've been having some pretty good luck out in that 30-foot plus water, so there's definitely fish out there. The bite's been really good. Moving on to the techniques. The techniques are going to apply pretty much anywhere. We've been doing pretty well on, it's almost an even split between jigging and the set lines. A lot of times the set lines will steal the show out on Mille Lacs, but this last week we've been doing really good with jigging spoons, which is fun. I love fishing jigging spoons. My best spoons this week have just been the 1/4 ounce rattle spoons. I like just the slab style, something with a nice Pyrex glass rattle. It's a little bit louder, but we've been using bright colors, you know, chartreuse or white and chartreuse. We've been fishing them pretty aggressively, dropping them straight to the bottom, lift them up a couple feet, jiggle them, rattle them pretty sharp, try to give them a lot of commotion and noise. And when the fish come in, we start teasing them up off the bottom, get them to about 3, maybe 4 feet off the bottom, and a lot of times they clobber it. Sometimes the fish, especially the bigger ones, are coming in so fast that you barely mark them on the flasher before they already have the spoon in their mouth. So the bite's been pretty fun with the jigging spoons lately. As far as the set lines go, there's a couple different ways that you can do the set lines. One is just a plain hook, and the other one is to put some sort of weighted jig on it. Whatever weighted jig that you prefer is fine, you know, whether it's a demon or just a ball head jig. But a small shiner, 3 to 4 inch shiner on a set line, on a plain hook or a jig, has been producing a lot of fish for us also. And we're catching the small ones all the way up to the big ones doing that too. Hopefully these tips help you out, and have a great weekend.